Teacher Kathleen Carpenter. Kathleen, we're glad to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. This is a difficult position to be on the agenda, so I'll try to be brief, although I am my mother's daughter, and sometimes it's hard to break free of that tradition of oratory in our family. Okay, I'll just tell you when to change slide. Okay. So I'm here this morning to hopefully give you a boots on the ground perspective about what's happening with mathematics in this state. And if you'll go to the second slide, just gives you a little bit of my pedigree, which is the bottom slide on your handout. I do have experience as a high school mathematics teacher. That was my first career when I started teaching in Ohio before we moved to Georgia 14 years ago. I did work at the state agency in Ohio as a mathematics and technology specialist. I led committees that implemented state standards and developed state standards and assessments. When I came to Georgia, I worked as a specialist for the Southern Regional Education Board on a federally funded, not a federal project, a federally funded project to improve achievement in high poverty districts across the Southeast. I worked with 72 school systems as part of that project over 6 years. I've most recently become an independent mathematics consultant because I am also a mother to 3 children who are in Georgia's public schools, 2 third graders and a 6th grader. My children attend Title I schools, which are high poverty schools, and my daughters in elementary school are fortunate to attend an elementary that has children from more than 3 dozen countries. It's an amazing place to come to school every day. Some of you may have heard of me before because last March I did a 13-point analysis of the proposed Senate Bill 167, which is what kind of started my involvement in this effort. Next slide, please. So I have 2 brief goals this morning, and I have my contact information at the end of the packet. I'm not making that public because I've gotten burnt with that before. So the committee members have my contact information, and I welcome your comments or further questions at the end of my presentation. I want to examine the intent and the unintended consequences of what's happened with the implementation of the Common Core, as well as provide a boots-on-the-ground story of what's actually happening in Georgia. Currently, I am working in almost 20 school districts in this state. I've worked with more over the years, all the way from Brunswick, Glenn County schools, all the way up to Catoosa County, all the way to Chattanooga, and all parts in between. So what I'm sharing with you this morning are not boilerplate comments. They're comments I created specifically for today, and they're not comments that are being given to me by any interest group. These are my comments as an independent mathematics specialist. I also, actually, Representative Coleman, I did view the first session, the July meeting. It's actually only 3 hours and 45 minutes, and I actually hooked it into my car and listened to it on the way to a couple long drives to some meetings. So I do want to just make a couple points that when we talk about mathematics in Georgia, we have to take a longer lens than just the recent implementation of the Common Core. If you, in your packet, and this is not part of the slides, so you don't have to advance it, is a copy of the current high school mathematics graduation requirements from the Georgia Department of Education as of October 28th, 2013. And what you need to know is that this is actually a simpler chart than we've had in many recent years because of the state of flux of our high school curriculum and in what is my opinion a knee-jerk reaction and hasty decision making when we come to high school course taking in this state. And that's the result of bowing to, in my opinion, political pressure and not actually what's best for teachers and students. But I leave that as your reference today. But I want to bring up 6 main points as far as, and they are brief, I promise, 6 main points with the what's happened, what I've seen happen in this state. And by the way, it's happening in other states too. My home state of Ohio, if you would like to pull the local control card, they actually have 88 counties and 612 school districts. So local control is alive and well all over this country as far as reaction to the Common Core. And so I promise you the conversation we're having today has some unique qualities to Georgia, but also there are some very common threads in many states across this country. So the main point of the Common Core, one of the main intents was to provide focus to the curriculum, to help get away from a laundry list of standards and to move toward, and this is page 4 in your packet if you're following along, and move toward a more concentrated curriculum that's deeper and richer. what happens unintentionally is that some people's quote-unquote favorites have gotten left off the list. Some people are concerned that there's no probability until 6th grade. Well, when you look at the research about how children actually learn probability, it's really not appropriate for young children. So we took some of the marbles and some of the rolling of die out of the elementary curriculum, developmentally appropriately, mind you, but some people took offense to that. The second intent rather of the Common Core was to provide coherence, both within the grade level as well as up and down the grade levels. And if you study the standards, you actually see that there are connecting ideas. Unfortunately, an unintended consequence of that is that this is a transition for parents, teachers, and students. We are not used to being explicit about using what we learned in 3rd grade to do mathematics in 4th grade. That's a new phenomenon in many of our schools. And so that takes a transition for many parents and many teachers and children. The third intent of the Common Core was to provide for a conceptual understanding of mathematics, so that I not only understand the topic, I don't only understand a procedure, but I understand what's behind it. And sometimes what happens is what I call the bulldozing anthills approach, is that you get parents, and well-meaning and well-intending parents, who will take an assignment that a teacher gives out of context and do something like post it on Facebook, and then misinterpret that assignment as the way we do mathematics in an everyday circumstance. And that really is just, in my opinion and what I've seen, it's a function of people not having conversations with their teachers and not understanding what's going on. So then a fourth intent of the Common Core was to provide for application of mathematics, where we provide students with the opportunity for meaningful, relevant learning. Unfortunately, some people take that to mean that we no longer care about skills, and that could not be further from the truth, because the fifth intent of the Common Core was not just to talk about skill development, but fluency development. So what does it mean to be a mathematics learner and to be able to be fluent in it? And embedded in that is the skills. An unintended consequence of that is a lack of communication with parents and a misunderstanding about what those skills are. However, if you read the standards, they are explicit. Starting in kindergarten, there are fluency requirements up through 6th grade for children. Then the last one, and this is the one that I get comments on most frequently, is this whole idea of rigor. And the intent of the Common Core was to really take those ideas of conceptual understanding, application, and fluency, and combine this to this rich learning experience for children that becomes rigorous mathematics. Unfortunately, what's happened is we've gotten this misguided notion of rigor being hard mathematics, or being inappropriate, things like inappropriate assessments for children. I know of 2nd graders last year who took a 17-page math test. That's not rigorous. That's torture. And the only point of that, in my opinion, is to get children to hate mathematics. And that wasn't the fault of the standards. That was the fault of poor choices by adults to implement those standards. And I would reference you, because the other point about rigor, it's interesting, what's been fascinating to me, because I've been doing this work since 1998, working on state policies all over the country. I've never seen a time where we have opposing arguments trying to argue the same thing, such as we want to get rid of the Common Core because they're too hard, but then another group will say we want to get rid of the Common Core because it's too watered down. And what happens is that I think it's just a misunderstanding of what happens when we implement standards. And one of those things that the watered down approach that I hear this comment, I just had a conversation with a colleague last week about this, is handout 5 in your packet, which is the multiple opportunities for middle school students to advance their understanding of mathematics by entering advanced study. The most egregious email I've seen is a message out to high school students saying that if you go through the Common Core, you will not be able to take calculus. Nothing is further from the truth. I have never worked with a district in the last 5 years that has even had that conversation, let alone made that policy decision. And so you see in the state of Georgia, we have at least, and districts have the option, of course, to have their own pathway for advanced study in mathematics. There are at least 5 state-developed options for children to advance their study in mathematics and culminate in advanced placement or post-high school rather study of mathematics. So, you know, none of these unintended consequences come from the standards. It comes from our imperfect implementation as a public as well as education community. And so that's just kind of my nutshell soapbox when it comes to the Common Core. But if you look on page 6 of your handout, I want to make most of my comments today about the work that I'm actually doing, which is the next slide. So the biggest piece of work I do right now is in the northwest part of the state, and it's called a Math Science Partnership Project. This is a federally funded grant that is administered through the state of Georgia. And when I started working with Northwest RESA in 2008, it serves 16 districts in the northwest corner of the state, about 100,000 students. We had teachers who are used to workshops, but not really professional learning and really studying how they were teaching mathematics and how their children were performing. Their mathematics teaching methods were largely based on tradition, as are many teachers in this state as well as across the country. And we had a very clear disconnect with state policies. About the time we started doing this work was also about the time that the Georgia Professional Standards Commission decided to excuse teachers from professional learning to renew their teaching certificate. In my opinion, that is a real injustice in our state. I just had to have a pulse this year to renew my teaching certificate. To me, that's criminal. We ask our hairdressers to do things every year. We ask our veterinarians to go to continuing ed every year. We don't ask our teachers to do that. I think that sends a message about the level of confidence we have in our state as teachers as professions. So we have this mismatch of our state policies with what we're actually going to ask teachers to do in our classrooms. Mind you, the best teachers do this already, and they will continue to do this. They will continue to do a good job. But what we need state policies to do is to be coherent and to provide for those children who do not have a voice, who typically have the weakest teachers. That's the protection we can provide them as a state in our policies. So we have this whole background. So we started this professional learning series in 2008 because of the state adoption and difficulty teachers were having with the performance standards. So what happened was also about that time was the Great Recession. And so the money just dried up. There was no money for professional learning. So we sought out this state-administered federal grant, Math Science Partnership, to support our work. So if you go to the next slide. Now, I've included in your page 7 of your handout some data because I am a math person and I had a statistics minor. I kind of do enjoy these numbers, but I won't bore the audience with them today. But your final results are on your handout. I won't share them today, but we started working with 65 math teachers from 40 schools. We provided them with the opportunity for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers to complete the mathematics endorsement that our RESA offers, that is approved by the Georgia Professional Standards Commission and is an add-on certificate. We gave them content and teaching pedagogy enhancement. We asked them to come to workshops during the school year, as well as give up 2 weeks of their summer, every summer. Now, we paid them for this. This was not volunteering at the church, but we paid them actually a rather paltry stipend in exchange for their attendance. You can see on your results, we actually ended up, as a result of this was pre-Common Core implementation in the state. We created an item bank of high-quality mathematics assessment items, as well as statistically significantly, and I know that's a lot to say, statistically significantly increased the content knowledge of those teachers and had performance from our students that we were pretty proud of. But we weren't done there. Next slide, please. Once we finished that round of funding, we went to a second round of funding that was designed to extend not only in mathematics but also in science. At this point, the Common Core was being adopted in the state, and we wanted a head start. We wanted a leg up with our teachers. And so we started what we called Project TRIMS, which our goal was to transform the region in mathematics and science. We extended to not only math teachers, but also science teachers for the endorsement, as well as providing webinars for those teachers. And we learned a lot in that because we tried to balance the desire of teachers to be in the classroom with their need to get high-level quality professional learning that can only be received through taking time out of class and getting a sub. And so we were fortunate that we had 71 teachers from 29 schools in that project. And we also then started providing in-depth on-site coaching to those teachers. You can see on page 8 of your handout are the final results. I won't belabor the point right today because of our time, but we had some difficulty extending into the high school area in terms of truly assessing the teacher content knowledge. And we're still working on that today with our current project. So we had a difficult time capturing whether or not we statistically significantly impacted the high school teachers' content knowledge. We have anecdotal feedback rather, that we had an impact on their teaching in a positive way. Next slide, please. Currently, we're finishing up round 3. That project ends September 30th. I'm helping corral the data for that project. We asked for the mother load, and we got it this time. We're training 142 teachers from 55 schools. We've expanded to not just individual teacher professional development, but we asked districts in these lean and mean times to endorse giving vertical teams the chance to provide teachers with the opportunity to collaborate, which they do not get as a regular part of their work experience, which is unfortunate for a variety of reasons. We actually had so many folks interested this time that we had districts from the non-Northwest region of our service area participate, and we currently only have year 1 results because literally as we speak, our data crunchers are crunching the 2014 results. But we've had some good success in the initial year of our analysis of our data. So our STEM to Core project is designed to help teachers take the Common Core standards for mathematics and whatever Georgia decides with the science standards, which we will not start that conversation today, to take it and really take it to the next level in terms of extending to a collaboration with employers. We were fortunate this past summer in June, we had 6 employers present to our teachers from that region who hire their graduates and actually told them what our children need. And you know what it was? It was the Common Core standards for mathematics. It was those mathematical practices of critical thinking and reasoning. If you go to the next slide, what we're really interested in, and we'll be presenting to the U.S. Department of Education at the end of September, these long-term results, are what we doing just a happenstance of what's currently happening across this state, or is it really because of the work that the team that I'm helping facilitate is doing at Northwest RESA? So what we did in 2013 is we had our data folks look at the long-term impact of the participation in our Math Science Partnership Program. And what we found were these 4 major areas where the districts that participated with us have statistically higher achievement, not only in mathematics, but you also see there in grades 6 through 8 science. They have statistically higher achievement, those districts that have been consistently participating in our work since 2009. And I share this with you today because our next goal is to tease out the whys. Why is this happening? Is it because those districts are doing other things as well? Or is it because this project is really impacting? And that's my goal for the next 12 months, is to try to figure this out and to provide information to those superintendents that serve on the governing committee of the Northwest RESA. But I will tell you, this has helped us get our final round of funding. We found out last week, not final, but our current next round of funding. We've gotten funded for round 4. And we're going to take the work even deeper and take some of the teachers in our region and have them lead students in what we're going to call a Student Innovation Expo, where those students will have to work together to solve a real-world problem and present to industry experts whether or not their solution is viable. By the way, if you're interested in any of the detailed data reports, I'm happy to email those to you. But if you'll go to the next slide, and this is one of the reasons I'm here today, is I wanted to share with you in closing kind of the extended impact that our work is having. So, you know, the goal of this committee is to look at what role the federal government has in our state in education. The work that I am helping out with at this point, I think, is some of the most important work. It would not have happened without federal dollars. This is good work in terms of we're able to take the lens of the Common Core. We've had the Common Core from the start of these projects as our linchpin, as our guiding principles, if you will, to help teachers do a better job with their students. So what has happened is we're seeing districts expand that vertical teamwork and rededicate their local dollars to have teachers engage in the vertical team process that are not part of this grant. Bartow County Schools is one that is implementing vertical teams K-12 in every feeder pattern that they have as a result, and we're helping facilitate that work. We have districts that are connecting this work to Georgia's STEM certification that's available to districts and programs. And they see this work as a vehicle to facilitate that certification. We also, with our teachers getting a math and science endorsement, it facilitates their opportunity to take advantage of House Bill 280, which provides them with a $1,000 a year stipend for getting that math and/or science endorsement, and then showing that they have had an impact on their students' achievement. And the last piece, which is kind of like an unintended consequence of our work in a good way, is that we've established a regional community of learners. Before we even received our notice last week that we are getting funded for the next round, we've already had emails from districts and from teachers and from principals saying, are you going to keep working with us? Is this work going to continue? And it also provides the RESA with a capacity building vehicle, because we don't have enough support staff in this state to train every teacher with the level of support necessary to really have an impact. So I want to share 3 things with you on my last slide. Thank you. There are 3 things that I hear teachers asking for as I go across this state. And the first one is consistency. I alluded to this at the beginning of my remarks in the sense that, in my opinion, and some of you may agree with me, and that's okay, I got to go meet the bus stop about 2 o'clock, so I'll be out of here and we don't have to double date or anything. But teachers need to know what the standards are and that they have time to get to know the standards. We have not afforded them this in recent years in this state, in my opinion. I'm still learning things about the Common Core Georgia Performance Standards, and I've worked with them as my life's work since their inception. Number 2, teachers need clarity. They need the resources to help clarify the standards and the level of expectation. We need to give our teachers time for the materials development to catch up to the standards process. I facilitated a group of 37 elementary math teachers in 2013 looking at the top 7 elementary math programs that are available to teachers in the marketplace. None of them met the Common Core standards to the level that those teachers thought that they should to really get the students to meet the standards. You know what that does, though? It doesn't tell them they can't use those materials, but it helps reinforce that they have to take a critical consumer's view when they use materials. We need to give our teachers clarity about what the expectations are and what the best materials are. Testing is still a mystery in this state, in my opinion. That's all I'll say about that right now. Number 3, support. Teachers need support to be comfortable. Arguing over the standards only impedes the work they really need to do. Standards are actually the least invasive aspect of the pressures that are facing teachers today. It creates an unnecessary distraction. If you've talked with a teacher recently, you know about all the other pressures they face. The standards are not the pressure they face. It's the new evaluation system. It's the new testing program. It's the new graduation requirements as they continue to change. It's new promotion requirements their district may be implementing. Standards are the least of their worries. In addition, states that abandon the Common Core are spending valuable time and resources creating new standards that actually end up looking nearly identical. If you've followed anything in the news, not to mention the fact the development process is rushed, I'll mention the state of Indiana that recently abandoned the Common Core and in the course of just a few weeks had new standards that when you read them were virtually identical. In my opinion, that's a waste of time and resources and a clouding of the message of what teachers need to be about. I want to thank you for your time. I hope that this state continues to conduct careful study and analysis in its policymaking, including collaboration with other states, believe it or not. We can learn with and from other states. And consultation with true leaders in the field of mathematics teaching and learning. We are at a perfect juncture of having common standards, understanding how children learn mathematics best based on real research and not tradition, and implementing assessments that measure true understanding. We need patience with and confidence in our school teachers and leaders as they continue this important work. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any questions? Yes, Dr. Avosa.
Mine's both the question. I'd like to start first by saying thank you to Ms. Carpenter for being here and sharing her work. I do get questions from time to time about parents saying to me, well, I understand that Common Core or our standards don't have multiplication tables or don't require kids. When you talk about fluency, what does fluency mean? And is that what a multiplication sort of memorizing, quote unquote, the multiplication tables means?
Okay, that's a great question. And I'll preface that by saying one of the best pieces of work I'm doing right now, and I'm doing this in 2 elementaries, is having parent math nights where we talk about these very important things. At my children's elementary last year, we even had an interpreter for Spanish-speaking parents. And we had about 60 parents every night. We had 5 meetings. And they were in sequential order. It wasn't y'all come and come to one. People came for the series. And that was one of the things we talk about. And when you look in the standards at every grade level in elementary, there are specific requirements that talk about students will understand, okay, I don't know, have it memorized off the top of my head, but they will know the addition facts, for instance, in first grade, know addition facts, single-digit addition facts from memory. That's crystal clear. In addition, they will use strategies to do subtraction facts. There are parallel standards like that in 3rd and 4th grade for multiplication. So fluency embeds the skill development in that, but it's also an effort, and I had the best definition about 3 summers ago. I was working with some teachers, and I asked them to define the word fluency, and I had the best definition, and a teacher said, it's natural. It's not fast. It's natural. I'm fluent in English, not because I can speak really fast, which is what we think fluency in mathematics is. No, it's natural. It's that I have a toolbox in my brain that I can pull things from. My daughters like to call them their file folders. You know, what file folder is that in your brain? But I know enough about not only that specific fact, but how to retrieve that fact and how it's related to other facts in the event that I can't remember it, to really have a working knowledge of mathematics. And that's what we're trying to get with fluency, is this balance of efficiency, which has a speed connotation to it. I don't want to sit here and do tally marks to find 9 times 8. I'm not saying that we can't teach kids a great trick for memorizing those facts. But as we teach them, and what our research shows, is that the best teachers interweave those facts and that fact development with understanding of the number system, understanding of operations. And that's what we need to give our teachers the time to do as they get to know these standards, because there are some nuances to the Common Core, and I'll be honest with you, there are some standards that give me heartburn, that I look at and I'm like, ooh, I don't like that. But as a body of knowledge, you will not be able to find a better set of mathematics standards in the sense of providing a coherent path up through learning the core mathematics that children need to learn in K-12 mathematics. Now, and I will tell you, my daughter's in 6th grade. My children are not gifted in math. My 6th grader is a musician. I don't know how this happened, because I am her mother and her father's a computer scientist. But she was in on-level math up until 4th grade, and then she begged to be in advanced math. And I let her because my husband told me I had to. But I can tell you the core that she has gotten in being on-level math is not an evil thing. It's not a bad thing. It's not a lesser thing. If you truly look at the standards, I'm married to an engineer who manages 16 electrical engineers. He works for an Austrian automation company. And about a year ago, he said, what's going on with these standards? I'm going to read them. He actually testified at the House committee. Right. Because I was out of town, I made him come. And I owe him forever, I've been told. But when you read the standards, which is what my husband did, who is not an educator, he said, I can't find anything wrong with these. I can't find anything undermining in these. I can't find anything brainwashing in these. And what I find most often is that people who have these large-scale beasts with the standards probably haven't actually read them. And I find that many, many times. So anyway, I kind of got off topic there, but I apologize.
Thank you. All right, we have another question. Representative Bronkway.
Yeah, and I realize I'm between us at lunch, so I'll be brief. But I guess my question is, and I appreciate you mentioning that this committee is to look at the larger federal role in education, not just standards. And one complaint I hear about federal funding, especially when it relates to education, is that it boxes us in and gets the state to do things that maybe we otherwise would not want to do. That's a big complaint that you have with Common Core, for example, and Race to the Top funding. And so your program seems pretty specific to do a specific thing. Could you just explain a little bit about how did you put that together? How did you find out that there were federal funds available for that? And was there pressure from the federal government to get you to do something in that program that you might otherwise not have wanted to do?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked me that. So the Math Science Partnership Grant, there's actually several different veins of that program, but our specific program is administered through a block grant to the Ohio Department of Education that then the state decides how they're going to prioritize their awards. And the state of Georgia, and the RFPs are on the website. If you go to the Department of Ed website, you can find those RFPs, requests for proposals. Our requirement is that we give first allegiance to state mandates, state standards, state policies. So all of our proposed work and funded work has been in an effort to forward the implementation of state policies. Now, there are some nuances to that. We are required to have a representative from a higher ed institution, and we are fortunate we work with math and science professors from the Georgia Highlands College, and they're incredible to work with, great group of folks. And that is in an effort to build that bridge to post-high school institutions. So we're required to do that. That is a requirement from the state, as well as we're required to have summer work. And part of that is just a mechanics thing. It's easier for the college folks to be clear, strategic, involved partners in that when they're not in that semester of their typical academic year. So I will tell you, there is no there was no mandate from the federal government as far as you will do this way. Our charge is, here's the only charge we have, is to increase teachers' content knowledge in mathematics and science. So we test our teachers using assessments that have been developed by several different entities across the country, as well as some developed by the state of Georgia, to provide a clearer picture of the impact of the project. Is that helpful?
Another question?
Absolutely. And I think a key word you said there was block grant. And
yes.
I think, as a state legislator, I wish that every federal dollar came down as a block grant, and with just minimal requirements that you described. We get boxed in and all sorts of ways and all sorts of funding that have nothing to do with education.
And I'll just,
that's a big concern I have. Thank you.
I'll just add, though, over the course of 3 funding cycles, we have tried to push the envelope a little bit, and the state has been very supportive of us trying to go beyond what the requirements are. And really, in this Student Innovation Expo, we cannot use grant dollars to touch students, to impact, to serve students directly. All the money has to serve teachers. So that's a requirement. But we're going to use our work to then bring in some of our business and industry partners to provide that external support to support things like a Student Innovation Expo.
Yeah, Representative Brown, I hope you can, and we'll buy you lunch.
I can stay till about 2, and then I got to go to the bus.
I hope you can, because right after we're going to deal with that race to the top and look at federal grants. That's one of our charges, and the strings attached. That'd be great if you could help us enter into that one too. One thing I'd like you to know, you notice you said RESAs. How many RESAs are there? There
16.
16, I thought. And you need to realize that a lot of these systems we found, if you remember members of this committee, and we traveled this state over, don't have I mean, Gwinnett, they're able to take care of they have their curriculum directors, and DeKalb and Fulton has it. But you find systems with a population of 500, 700, 1,000 students they don't have. And if it were not for Reese's and people like this, they would go under. They could not do it. So I want to my hats off to, and you work with just the one RESA, is that it?
Right now, I work part-time for the Northwest Georgia RESA.
North Georgia
yes.
RESA. Everybody understand what RESAs are? That's okay. All right. No other questions? One question. We got a question. All right. This is important. All right.
Thank you for your confidence, Mr. Chairman. So I'll be glad to say the blessing, but I'm devil's advocate here. You can kind of tell already. But, you know, early on in that first meeting you listened to right in the car, you heard a comment that 90% of GPS, the standards we had prior to Common Core, is in Common Core. And so that, I guess the people that are afraid of Common Core are looking at it, what's the difference? I think your perspective from being in Ohio, here you've seen a transition, and I think that's something that really has to get out in the public so people understand. I'd love to hear your...
Okay, a couple of things. You know, when you look at the Georgia Performance Standards and then the Common Core Georgia Performance Standards, there was some... I called it kind of moving the chess pieces around. You know, there was some moving of some topics. You know, something moved from 5th grade to 4th grade. You know, those kind of things. And we created crosswalks, similar to language arts, although I don't think we killed as many trees, where we mapped those changes. And I did that in more than one state. That was something that almost every state that adopted or modified the Common Core and then adopted, you know, has done to help teachers understand where those things lie. So from a logistical standpoint, some things moved from grade level to grade level. The Georgia Department of Education and Mathematics as well created a transition document where they helped teachers see in those transition years which topics needed to be moved temporarily to avoid children having gaps, and teachers have been using those. So from that perspective, content-wise, not much has changed in content. The biggest thing that has changed with respect to the mathematics is the equal weight given to what are called the standards for mathematical practice. That problem solving and communication and patterned reasoning, looking for structure in mathematics, is as important as the doing of mathematics. So, and when we develop our new assessments, because those standards are of equal importance, teachers will also get feedback about how well their children are doing with respect to those mathematical practices. So it's the how we do mathematics that is the biggest change. It's not just about the what. That causes great discomfort with some folks. My husband was singing in the choir when that came out because he has very bright engineers, and I've talked to multiple employers that have the same experience. He has to get rid of engineers who can't problem solve, who can't talk to customers. His team provides support for people who are having problems with their computers. And so if they can't model that problem in their office, they have to waste time and resources to go to California, to go to Michigan, to solve the problem that Chrysler's having on their assembly line with the robot that's being programmed by his company's computers. So in his mind, the benefit of the Common Core is to help even our brightest children become better mathematical thinkers and not just doers. You know, I used to teach calculus years ago, and I had very bright students, but I had what were called the mindless memorizers. And those were those children who were extremely bright, and they got through because they could learn the laundry list. And traditionally in high schools in this country, that's who we've taught mathematics to, and that's who we've reserved our best teachers for. I tried to buck that trend because when I was teaching AP Calculus was when the calculus folks did this transition years and years ago, and it was not without growing pains, and it was not without protests, and it was not without lots of public hearings themselves. But what they found is that you had, for instance, my kids in 1996 had to do weekly essays in their calculus assignments, in their calculus class. Now, I was not their friend. I wasn't there to be their friend. I was to help them learn calculus at a deep level. And I did that as a calculus student, and I knew calculus like I felt like I knew it. And that was a growing pain for my children. When my results come back, you couldn't argue with them. And I had private school teachers from the most affluent schools in Ohio coming to watch me teach because they wanted to know, how did I get these kids to have this level of performance? And it's because we valued not just the what of mathematics, but that conceptual understanding and those practices. Now, one more point. From a logistical perspective, when we have a consortium of 40-some states that have the same standards, textbook companies listen. Materials developers listen. And so the power of being part of a consortium with mathematics standards is that teachers now have usable materials that have valuable resources being plugged into them, rather than textbook publishers trying to give a sticker to put a Georgia version of their curriculum out. So from a materials adoption and a materials development standpoint, it's a win for teachers in terms of helping them have better resources that they can then still take that critical consumer's eye, but have more confidence that they've actually been developed with these standards in mind rather than the idiosyncrasies of each state.
Let me, because they give me to see, but I want you to stick around. But you had a question. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. If I just really,
If she can give, because I'm going to have her come right after we get
well,
back.
it's interesting. We keep talking about autonomy for teachers, which is, I think, very valuable. But when you talk about to be successful, you have to have alignment of resources with your initiatives and what you're trying to do. So you mentioned a block grant. What I'm looking for, I think, is Representative Brockway touched on it, is the amount of autonomy you had with this grant. Is it because it was a block grant and you had that autonomy to do the things that needed to be done? I'm looking for that's, I think, is a barrier, and I'm trying to understand how much autonomy you had.
Absolutely. We had total autonomy in choosing the strategies that we felt were necessary to be funded to increase the teacher's content knowledge. And I'll tell you, there's usually about close to 24 projects that are funded across the state, and we go to meetings where everybody's, I'm going to one next week for the next round. The range of activities and experiences that the different projects gives teachers from across the state is very varied.
And was there a lot of paperwork you had to do that was cumbersome as a result of this?
The only complaint I have, since I have done the paperwork for 6 years, is that the budget line items don't match up. So when we have to report how we spend funding, for instance, teacher stipends are considered one category at the federal level and a different category at the state level. So anytime I do a budget report, I have to create two. That's my only burden that I face in terms of inconsistency.
We're going to, when we get on the federal part right after lunch, we're going to deal with that. We'll deal with these block grants. We're going to talk. So we're not going to stop, because that's one thing we wanted. All right, we're going to break for lunch now. Who can tell us where they need to go and guide us? Stand up and tell us. Now, where's the group? The four superintendents are meeting where? Where? I can't hear. Upstairs. Upstairs where? All right, she's out there, guys. So listen, we're going to be back here at about 1:20. We're going to start back. We're going to cut it a little bit. All right.